In early January 2017, a father and son with a metal detector found the partial skeletal remains of an Allied soldier in a farmer's field south of Caen in France. Nothing clearly indicated the nationality of the remains, but a helmet, a canteen, and a pipe provided clues that it might be a Canadian soldier. There was also a ring with the initials JAC. With those clues, the Department of National Defense's Casualty Identification Program kicks into high gear.
When remains are discovered and they're believed to be Canadian, usually that happens because of the location of where they were discovered, or if there's something on the remains that had Canada on it, like a button or a shoulder title or something like that. And so we use all the artifacts that are found to give us some clues as to any personal or unit identifiers that can help us narrow down the list of who this could be.
First, the Casualty Identification Program has to find out if the remains actually belonged to a Canadian service member. Both British and Canadian soldiers fought in the area where the remains were found. So to narrow it down, a historian researched which Canadian units were there.
I knew the battles of the Battle of Normandy. I know the details. I'd been to the area before I'd been to the ground, but now I'm trying to piece all that experience and going to those locations with the history, with fragments of information, whether it's a signet ring or a helmet, or who's there, what are they doing, when are they doing it.
Next, a member of the team flies overseas for anthropological analysis. Sarah Lockyer creates a biological profile to help reveal the soldier's identity.
Based on the age and the height range that I'm able to derive from the remains, we then look at the list of potential candidates that the historian has put together, and we can eliminate everybody who's too young, too old, too short, too tall.
Genealogical research is the next step, with the ultimate goal of finding a DNA donor, a daunting task.
We use a specific type of DNA in order to test with a set of remains, so we have to use candidates that follow usually the matrilineal line. So we have to find if the soldier in particular didn't have kids, did he have a sister who had kids, and then did they have kids? Which can sometimes get complicated.
In some cases, remains can be identified with just historical analysis and anthropological research. But in the case of JAC, that was not enough.
Firing.
So the team had to turn to dental science to help identify the remains. The Canadian Forces Forensic Odontology Response Team looked at 45 files, comparing the remains to dental records.
We were able to reduce the number of possible dental profiles that would match to actually 4 files. Of the 4 files, 3 were possible, which means that we could not exclude the person, but for one of the files, actually, we had a strong correlation between the dental remain that they found.
That file belonged to a sergeant, John Albert Collis, a soldier who already had a marked grave.
This guy wasn't even supposed to be in the list of individuals that we suspected to be missing. And the only reason that Commonwealth added him was because there was a ring that was found with the remains.
Now that the list had been narrowed down, it was time for DNA analysis, matching the teeth found in the farmer's field with Collis's descendants.
Waiting for those answers, it was like waiting on Christmas morning. Like, you just can't wait to hear what the answer is.
It was a match. JAC was in fact Sergeant John Albert Collis from the Royal Hamilton Light Infantry. Finally, it was time to reach out to the family.
I would say personally it was kind of just like a really big moment of like honor, knowing that I am related to someone who was brave enough to go and fight for our country, and it really has kind of made me feel like our family has learned so much about where we've come from, and it's made us feel kind of more whole.
And to be able to have it in our hands is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Megan and Danny Gallagher are descendants of Sergeant Collis, but they knew very little about him before the military reached out.
The story that I learned through my mother before she passed was that Grandpa sat on a landmine and he lost his life during a rest period in the war. Now, what I've learned recently through the Casualty program has been that isn't necessarily the case what happened.
The truth was finally revealed. Sergeant Collis was killed in action during the Battle of Verrières Ridge in 1944. The battle was part of Operation Spring. Collis's regiment was responsible for capturing and holding the village of Verrières. Sergeant Collis was among the 360 Canadians who died at the Battle of Verrières Ridge. In the chaos after the battle, he was buried in a makeshift grave. Later, he was exhumed and reburied at the Bretonville-sur-Lez Canadian War Cemetery in France, but some of his remains were left behind, waiting to be found in that farmer's field.
This memorial cross is forwarded to you on behalf of the Government of Canada in memory of one who died in the service of his country.
Now, after 75 years, Sergeant Collis has finally been laid to rest, with his family and comrades present.
Being able to put that ring in my hand and to witness the pencil and the pipe, it just brought my grandfather somehow to life for me. Remembrance Day will never be the same for me again. It's got a heartfelt meaning now of meeting the other veterans while we were on the trip, and just the stories, and yeah, learning how my grandfather actually died. It's incredible.
What started with a ring, helmet, pipe, and unidentified remains turned into an opportunity for a family to be reunited with someone who they had never had the chance to meet. In 12 years, the Casualty Identification Program has positively identified 31 Canadian soldiers and 19 foreign soldiers. But there are still over 27,000 Canadian war dead with unknown graves from the First World War, the Second World War, and the Korean War.
I don't think we'll ever be able to put a name to a grave for the 26 plus thousands that are still listed as unknown, but we'll sure continue to do what we can at least until I'm finished my service. I think it's important.